So here we are with episode 9 of Downtime at DT. It's taken a bit of wrangling, a lot of my people talking to his people, but I finally managed to get our general manager, Saul, on the podcast. So Saul.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome along. Welcome to Sydney.
Thank you.
Is it going all right?
Yeah, so far so good.
And what's your sort of, 2 months in, is it?
Month and a half.
What's
5
your
weeks.
five weeks opinion of Australia?
I love Australia.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like a cleaner version of the United States.
Yeah,
that
wow.
Didn't really have, a massive recession for the last 5 years. So a lot of things in California in particular is kind of crumbling right now.
Right.
Whereas here everything seems kind of new and upbeat. There's a ton of construction going on downtown, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, nice. Do you feel that you need to bring democracy to our country at all? Like, we're doing okay?
I'm not sure that we're the ones to bring that to people at this point.
Yeah, right. So you've come in as the GM of the Sydney office. Can you talk to me a bit about what a GM does, other than sort of look like you have important meetings in that room? What is your day-to-day role here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's really just, the success of DT Sydney and the success of everybody individually as well.
Yeah.
One of my first bosses told me that as a manager, your job is to have high standards and serve your employees.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of it. Part of serving employees is making sure we have good work to work on, that's exciting projects, that's connected to our passion. Part of serving is make sure that teams are set up well, that people have the right resources they need to get stuff done, that communication channels are flowing, that we have good processes when we have to work collaboratively, which we do all the time. Mm-hmm. Part of it's, making sure that people have a good sense of where we're headed and why and what's working and what's not. So a lot of it, it's about creating the environment. It's making sure people understand what the expectations are and then letting people know how things are going.
So from a practical point of view, like someone like Sarah Sophie, she'd write, project plans and timelines and cost estimates. What would be sort of the practical outputs of your role? I really struggle because it's such a all-encompassing role for me. So I'm trying to, if I break it down into I do this, then I feel like maybe I'll understand it a little bit.
So you mean like tangible deliverables, things that I actually do?
Yeah, the Brian's like, Saul, where's this? What is that?
A couple of tangibles. So we've started having the 4:30 every Friday all together stand-ups where we talk about stuff. That's a tangible to me.
Yeah.
Similarly, we've started doing the Sydney leadership team every week. We have meetings, so we have action items from there.
Yeah, right.
That's important just for us to actually manage the team. We actually have to get together sometimes.
Yeah, right.
On top of that, a lot of it's sort of I'm still developing.
Yep.
So, I want to have kind of a end of month closing summary. So how did we do? How many pitches did we win? How many did we try to do? How many deliverables did we check off? How our projects run? Some of that will be like a highlight reel. So this month we've got some great ones with Macquarie and TA that we can just say, boom, launched live.
Yeah.
Sometimes we won't have such big things, so we'll look for little things like that. But I'm envisioning sort of like one page that just has like the vitals of how we did this month.
Yeah, great.
With some indicators of how we've done things. And then a lot of that will drive what we're going to do the next month. So what do we need to improve on, that kind of stuff.
So you're sort of looking at, this is how I would try and summarize your role. You would look at our successes and what we can learn from those successes so that we continue our successes. Is that kind of
that's right? Yeah.
Now, how does money factor into all of this? I guess is your kind of view on this is that if we are successful, then the money kind of takes care of itself? Yeah,
that's my operating assumption.
Yeah.
If you do the right things, the numbers will follow.
Yeah. Okay.
If you work hard at it, I guess.
Yeah.
So I always am grounded in sort of financial background or a data background of things.
Yeah.
And I always like to try to use a number to validate my point. So if I say it's the right thing to do, well, how right is it?
Yep.
And is it more right than something else you could do? That's where it's helpful to have a number to put to something or some facts behind an idea that you have.
Yeah, great.
So someone might say to me, cab charges, for example. We spend a lot on cabs.
Yeah, we do.
Henry came up to me recently and said, Uber X, I think, is 30% cheaper. we should use that instead. I said, okay, let's try it. So we're actually going to set up a trial account with that. So we'll pilot that idea. We'll see how much we save in a short term, and that'll tell us how right the idea of UberX is or not. But I think it's right to try something different. It's a different service. There's some nice features to it. We get a little bit better reporting on how that money's being used.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's try it out.
Just mystery city to suburb, like you get.
Crow's Nest to suburb. Like, great.
Yeah. That suburb.
Yeah.
Now, as a general manager, I guess you have to. There's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. There's a lot of stuff that there's a lot of people in this office that you are looking out for. So in the animal kingdom, the spirit animal kingdom, who is the animal that's looking out for Saul? That you kind of evoke and be like, yes, come to me, spirit animal, I need your help.
I've always liked the gorilla.
The gorilla, yeah,
my favorite animal. They don't say much, unless you teach them sign language, and then they actually can talk a lot. I mean, they're just these massive, massive animals that are really strong, really social. Their social groups are very well organized.
Yep.
And they're just cool looking. Like, you never feel anything but calm and strength when you look at a gorilla.
Have you? Well, I assume you probably haven't been to Taronga Zoo yet, but they have an amazing gorilla enclosure there. I've been there many, many times. Spent a lot of time just looking at the gorillas, and I get what you say. There's kind of this strength and calmness that come from them. Like, I'm not going to mess with you, but you don't need to do anything to tell me that I don't need to mess with you.
Yeah, they're not like chimps or orangutans where they're screeching and running around all the time. Yeah. They're pretty much like, they're 800 pounds, and their muscle density is another 8 times greater than ours. So
wow.
They're just these freakishly powerful creatures that just don't really do a whole lot, which is great.
So I'd highly recommend that, because they do the feedings and stuff, and then you see the social structure as well, like who the alphas are and all that, and how they kind of interact with each other, and it's amazing. So speaking of sort of getting out of the office and experiencing life beyond the wonders of St. Leonard's, what kind of stuff do you get up to outside the office? Like, what are your passions? What are you kind of trying to get involved in?
I'm a big traveler normally, so that's a big part of what's exciting about me moving to Australia. Is there's just a whole continent to explore, a whole region in the Pacific to explore. And I'm not even kidding. Australia.com, the new version, has been really helpful for me.
That is amazing.
I'll tell you a joke or it's a true story that I've told a couple people, but after I'd signed up for DT, I knew that Oz.com was one of our projects, but I was under the impression it had already launched.
Right.
So I was sitting with my partner, and I was trying to show her like who we are and what we do, and I showed her the old Oz.com, and she was like, "Ooh, is it too late to maybe rethink this?" Because the old one obviously was not up to grade.
Was there a bit of flash work on the old side as well?
It just didn't have any information, and it was hard to get around. So the new one is actually, once I saw it, I was like, this is actually personally helpful for me, because I need to kind of explore Australia, and I've been on it a lot, and it's been helpful. I found some good stuff. That's
amazing. Oh, look, I could talk to you forever about Australia. So I went and lived overseas for 5 years, and then realised that Australia is the best place in the world, and I will just rabbit on forever about all the great places. So we should have a chat a bit later on, because I know the podcast doesn't really care about my love of Australia. I'll tell you an interesting story that I shared a story when I was in a conversation with like the CMO, Nick, from Tourism Australia, and it became a bit of a joke, is that I saw one of the Tourism Australia ads and started to cry in the cinema, because I was like, it was the dead of winter in London. I was like miserable. I just wanted to go home. And then this beautiful Australia, I still call Australia home, ad came on, and I was like, and so I started telling the story in the meeting, and I started to choke up, and I was like, oh, keep it together. Like, so I too share a great love of Australia.
Well, it's funny because I'm obviously from the States, but I'm from California. Yeah. And so I'm much more of a California patriot than I am a U.S. patriot. Yeah. And I'd say California and Australia have a lot of similarities, and I've seen even some of our strategy work identifies that as a big competitor. Yeah. So I'm not ready to jump ship. They're a little too similar, and I'm gonna stick it out for California until I'm proven otherwise.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can get you a full convert. You'll be talking through your nose and not opening your mouth when you speak in no time. Be like, yeah, going, doing all right. So what is it that drove you to be a manager or a general manager? So what are the sort of the things that in your career path that brought you to this place?
Actually, I started my career in management.
Yep.
So a lot of big companies do these management rotational development programs.
Okay.
GE is really famous for starting big ones.
The Six Sigma was that?
Yeah, well, Six Sigma is a lean process improvement.
Right.
Management rotations basically just take someone who just finished school and just put them in a bunch of different jobs all around the business and in some sort of management capacity. So you either give them a project to do or an improvement to hit or a small team to run. So my first job was at a company that had one of those programs. So I was a manager in my first day of work. And the job there was always, the big role there was called branch manager. And that's basically the head guy for a territory of the U.S. responsible for everything. And they tell you on your first day, like, your success is defined as become that person. So we want you to become the next, this guy was Andy Walters at the time, you need to become the next Andy Walters. So it's really ingrained to me that that's what success looks like. And it became something that just clicked really well for me.
So how do you, like, your first day, literally, like, you are now manager of these people, like, straight out of uni?
Yeah, my first job, this was a big e-commerce company that had this massive, huge warehouse, high velocity, tens of thousands of orders going out.
Yeah.
And so one of the structures was this four-story tall, 200,000 square foot with parts that fit in size of shoe boxes, like so small, like bits of screws and stuff.
Yeah.
So you have 80 people who are running around the structure all day long, getting printouts that say, go get 5 of these, put them in this box, 10 of those, this box, etc. And there was a capacity balancing issue. So this thing was 4 stories tall, and maybe there was work on the 4th floor, but there was capacity on the 1st floor. How do people know to float up and down the staircases to move to the work?
Yeah, right.
So I had an idea for a system to build.
Yeah.
So I had that idea, and my boss was like, great, that's an expensive system, so prove it. So what he did basically is he gave me 12 walkie-talkies that I had on my belt and a clipboard. And so I had people with walkie-talkies on each floor and each section of the floor calling me in to say if they had excess work or excess capacity.
Yeah.
So I had basically just 2 columns on a piece of paper and a pencil on a clipboard. And I was like, all right, 5 units of work, 3rd floor southeast, 5 units capacity, 1st floor northwest.
Yeah.
And I would try to on the fly be this dispatch system.
Yeah.
You know the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon Money track?
Yeah.
The intro to that is kind of all these like cash register and coin sounds. When I would close my eyes at night, I would hear walkie-talkie noises like, come back, over, what's your 20, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And just like constantly. I did it for 2 weeks, and it was awesome. I was walking 12 miles a day, doing hundreds of flights of stairs, exhausted, but approved the concept, built a dummy system using some macros and Gmail. That worked pretty well. And then finally convinced the company's systems department to build real code for it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that was like my first managing people. It was more managing a process, I guess, than having any direct reports at that point.
Is there any chance we can have walkie-talkies?
Love walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
And why?
I don't know. Maybe I just want to talk to Rich, and then because there's like a giant gap between our desks.
Yeah. Or what about like a can and a string?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I had a plan that my friend lived in the street next to me, and we had plans to make a giant can string type device that we could talk to each other.
Yeah. I'm actually really surprised that we don't have like an instant messenger that we use in-house.
Yeah, I think a few people have tried to bring it up. I want to say Slack. That's a thing, isn't it? Yeah. I think it's like to try and get away from email, and it's all kind of on a messenger-based blogging type platform thing.
Yeah, I guess I have 2 minds about it. One, I'd like to outlaw email.
Yeah.
In reality.
Yeah.
So maybe instant messenger is just a step worse than what I'd like.
Because I listened to a podcast from the guy, Matt something or other, who runs Automatic, which is WordPress.
Okay.
And they do not use email. They use a custom WordPress blog and Slack. So I'll share that with you because it might be a thing to do. But I actually don't send a lot of email. I just go and talk to people.
Yeah.
I prefer just to have a conversation. And
I was at a place where we did outlaw email. So between 10 and 4 every day, there was no internal email allowed.
Yeah, wow.
which was kind of nice. You just have to go either talk to people or figure it out on your own,
Yep.
or just wait until after hours. And so then you knew, you could answer your email at the end of the day, you can answer your email in the morning, but you really didn't have to pay much attention to it the rest of the time.
Yeah, wow. You'd be so much more productive. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was. It was just kind of weird also. It
Yeah.
caused some tension where you'd have to go, Mikey, you sent this email at 11 o'clock. That's against the rules. You need to shape up. This was also just a crazy company that would do that kind of thing. So
You get a dead leg as punishment. Do you understand the concept of the dead leg?
I'm not sure that I do. Is that where you punch someone in the thigh?
So you basically punch them in the thigh, and then their leg goes weak and they can't walk. What's the American equivalent of that?
I think we do dead arm a little bit more than dead leg, but it's the same thing.
The dead leg, it's a successful technique. I have a theory that punishment for most things should be a dead leg.
The beatings will continue until the morale improves.
Yeah. Now, I kind of see that your skills of management and kind of finding optimal ways to things would actually work quite well for the next question. But if you were suddenly transported back to 7th century medieval England, how do you think you would go in that area?
So I'm a fan of the podcasts, and I've heard you use this question. I love the question. Yeah. But I'm also a big history buff.
Yeah,
and
right.
So I would be dying of old age if I was in the 7th century. Like life expectancy is what, 32, 34. Yeah. I'd be pretty much dead.
Because that's about the Dark Ages, and that's the Romans. No, I think the Romans left. No, that makes sense. We're probably coming to the end of the Dark Ages of medieval England at that point. So yeah you'd be dead. I'd be dead.
I'd be dead. We'd all be dead.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'd be a village elder, I guess.
Yeah, you'd be imparting your wisdom.
I would have, I probably would be illiterate.
Yeah.
Maybe I've learned a couple of markings and symbols and stuff that I can use to give insight to people.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't be doing a whole heck of a lot. I mean, what do serfs do? I'm rowing.
You're allowed to work
making rows for the turnip fields and stuff.
Yeah. Eating potatoes.
So this is something else that's always funny to me is like millennials are always, the tyranny of the 9 to 5. You have to get out of that.
Oh man, yeah.
And to me, it's, sure, but at least you're not working 200 hours a week growing turnips for some liege lord.
Yeah.
Somewhere and dying of old age at 34.
Yeah. And you're like 4'7" because you've not had enough nourishment.
Yeah, and you're missing like a finger and most of your teeth and a ear and stuff. So
yeah, I definitely have many first world problem checks in my life. My fiance's family is from Lebanon, and a lot of the family still live there. So some days they don't have water, some days they don't have electricity. Plumbing. When you don't have plumbing, like it's just a revolution.
Well, I'm having like first world problems in Australia.
Yeah,
just because it's not in some ways as first world as the States, particularly with the internet.
Oh man!
So like, I want to stream some movies on my phone, and it's just not happening.
No, it's not.
And we've had to work out. Me and my partner. It's really complicated how we're going to watch all of the reality TV that we're used to. Because you can't find a good stream for a lot of that stuff. It's the really trashy stuff's not on Hulu, and with the VPN, we can't get it.
Netflix. Optus launching Netflix.
Good plug, but I don't think they're going to have the trash that we really want to watch.
Like what trash are you talking about?
My favorite reality shows is two shows actually. It's The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. You guys carry that here?
We do, but also it makes me want to kill myself. That's the thing. But anyway,
it's a great show because the first time I watched it, I was not sold. I wasn't convinced that it was worth watching. But what's great about it is people really think that they're falling in love on the show. So it's not just they're doing it just for the TV.
Yeah.
They actually believe that these are real emotions and real relationships they're creating on the program.
Yeah, yeah.
And it turns into blood sport. It's just like, it's so dramatic in a really real way that I love it.
You might like a show called Farmer Wants a Wife.
Yeah, that's pretty similar. Yeah.
Have you heard of this yet?
I can imagine it, but go on.
So it's basically, there's a real problem in sort of rural Australia in that there's no women.
Yeah.
And that, because a lot of the women leave, go to school, and then the sons stay on the farm and help out. And then, it's happened to a couple of my cousins, they've stayed on the farm and there's just no women. It's like 5 people in the town kind of thing, and they're all men.
Yeah.
So they did this show where they'd get these farmers and they would, pretend they're like the cowboys and, really rugged. And there'd be sort of these 15 city girls trying to get themselves a man. And so maybe that's something you could get yourself into.
Maybe. I am pitching a reality TV show currently.
Yes.
With a producer back in the
Yes.
States.
Yeah.
So I was flying from a business trip after I knew I was coming to TT, but I was still working my old job.
Yeah.
I was seeing this woman who is a former beauty queen. She was Miss
Yeah.
Kansas in the 90s, and she was the main person on a dating reality show called Average Joe's, which was one of the first dating reality shows around 99, 2000. Now she's a presenter on TV and does like reality stuff. So we're pitching a show called Foreign Affair about a guy who goes to a foreign country for a great job opportunity, wants to find love, but doesn't want to marry a local and then have the tension of moving back eventually. So he's moving, let's say, to Sydney, and there's going to be 16 eligible bachelorettes back in wherever he's come from, let's say Los Angeles. Each week he sends them a video challenge. So, part of what's going to be exciting for us in Australia is taking advantage of the great outdoors. I want to see how you girls do on a camping trip. And then the girls have to go live in a tent for like a week. And then he watches the video of it, judges them, and then picks one to move on to the next round. He gets to come to Australia and have a few dates with him and see if there's chemistry. Maybe 5 or 6 different women come and have a date, and then they're in Australia together. There's another round of elimination, and he picks one to become his de facto partner on his visa, is the romantic ending.
Yeah, right.
So we're pitching it right now. We're pitching it to Sony, to Paramount. We'll see how it goes. This woman who I barely know is really excited about it. She thinks it's got legs, but I'm not convinced.
That's really interesting. I would never have thought that was going to come out in this podcast.
You never know.
There you go. Maybe Tourism Australia could get involved in that.
We actually were talking about that when we were pitching the show, that you need partnerships with something just like Tourism Australia. I didn't know who they were at the time, but that would be the way to fund the show, is partnerships.
I think they get involved in some of the movie making stuff, like getting big name movies to come to Australia and showcase some of their stuff. So maybe
content.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly that Australia is somewhat in the past in terms of our infrastructure and whatnot, which I put down to we have such a massively dispersed population. Like 20 million people in a country about 70% the size of the US. Like, it's
fair enough. Yeah.
So, just taking one back for Australia.
That's why you brought that up.
Yeah.
Just defend Australia.
Yeah.
Wasn't go anywhere.
Australia.
Yeah.
So but when we think about, the NBN rolling out and the future of infrastructure and the future of internet technology, what is it that gets you excited and you're sort of like, that's the thing that I'm looking forward to. I want to see that happen right now.
I think one of the things that was interesting to me about thinking about this job before I started was our digital lives are getting really cluttered and really noisy.
Yep.
And there's the obvious culprits, how many passwords do you have? How many times do you have to get an app update? There's things like that there's so many layers of potential convenience that at a certain point it becomes less so.
Yeah.
So broadly speaking, I think that's something that's actually almost humanitarian that DT can deliver. It's a fact of life that we're going to be dealing with a lot of digital touch points forever.
Yeah.
When they're well designed and when they're actually useful to you and when they're enjoyable and delightful and all those good things, you actually are going to make kind of your life and people around you's lives better in some tangible way.
Yeah.
It's not the bottom of the pyramid of human needs, but it's kind of the level that we all live at in these first world problems. And it is something I think does cause some amount of stress and distress in people's lives. It's just the amount of tech noise that they have to deal with.
Yeah, it's right. Like my dad, I feel like should be a case study for everything that we do at DT. If my dad can use it, we're okay. He once sent me an email where the whole email was in the subject line.
Yeah.
And I was like, winner.
I always think about this too. Like for my parents, the first time you had a computer, it was very easy to destroy your computer.
Yes.
You could accidentally move some system file or whatever, and your computer's just dead. You just spent a lot of money on whatever computer you got, and you would hear these sort of horror stories like, I pressed Alt F7 and my hard drive's gone now.
Yeah.
And computers are a little bit more stable now. Like, you can't really do that kind of stuff unless you try.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think for that generation growing up when technology was so vulnerable and could be destroyed by human error, I can kind of see, like, I'm more keen to just press a bunch of buttons and click a bunch of stuff and figure out, like, oh, okay, now it does what I want it to do.
Yeah,
it's like just mash the screen until output. Whereas I feel like the older generation just they have some good trepidation just based on experience for some reason.
I had something I wanted to talk to you about in the midst of that, but I have completely forgotten it. So I'll edit this part out of the conversation. Shit. So I watched the movie Her on the weekend. Have you seen that?
Uh-huh.
And I started to really, I thought it was an okay-ish movie.
Yeah.
But what I really enjoyed about it was the passive nature of all the technology. So a lot of the stuff that they were doing was kind of an augmentation of organic type things. Like he writes these handwritten letters on a computer and then prints them out. Like there was kind of this sort of desire to go back to more organic things, but there wasn't a lot of visible screens and visible stuff. There was just this little, looked like a cigarette case, I guess, was the whole thing. And I started to really enjoy that. It did open up a lot of philosophical things about technology and all that kind of stuff, but I did like that it played a secondary role rather than it being, look at me, you need attention to be given to me all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I mean, when I travel, it's starting to become ridiculous. Like I was at a little place in Italy last year.
Yeah.
And they had Wi-Fi. And they said, how many Wi-Fi codes do you need? And I said, 2. They said, no. I said, what? No, that's how many I need. You're American. You must have more devices. And I was a little bit insulted, but I was like, actually, right. You're right. I have my phone and my iPod, and I have my iPad.
Yeah.
I have my Kindle, so if I want to download another book, I might want to do that. My camera is Wi-Fi enabled, so if I want to get photos off of my chip, that would also be helpful.
Yeah.
So you're right. I need 5. I need 5 connections right now. And then,
but do you?
Ooh. No, not really. But I felt like I needed them.
Which is it's such a strange thing, and I find myself fighting that. For example, again, when I went to Lebanon, there's no Wi-Fi. Like it's very, very rare.
Yeah.
So when we stay with her aunt, she had Wi-Fi in the house, but it was super shitty, and some days you just didn't have electricity for 4 hours or whatever. And it was amazing. So you'd have these sort of designated times where we'd go and hover around the router and we'd send our emails to tell the parents I had died and, send the Instagram photos and stuff. And then that would be it. Like that was the connection you had, and it was nice.
Yeah, and it's just, it's also interesting though, going back to the movie Her, a handwritten letter is still a very nice thing to do.
Yes.
Like whenever I get like a postcard from somebody, or if I've taken a trip with someone and then while we were there, they write a postcard and send it from there and I get it, a couple weeks later, it's so much more memorable than any other Skype chat or text or whatever that I might receive from them, or a Facebook photo album. And I don't know if there's a great tech answer to that. I think a lot of it is perceived as, you can do things digitally and save some time. But it's in some of these things, it's just false economy. We're just doing more of many things than doing anything particularly well or meaningfully.
So I have a theory. It's around the sensory information. So an email, you can see it and you might be able to hear it if there's an audio thing. But a postcard, it has all of those elements. You can see it, you can hear it, you can touch it, you can taste it if you want. Like there's a richer sensory type thing, and I think maybe that creates a more evocative memory for you.
Well, I think there's also, I guess I was thinking about it a little differently. I was reading this interesting book, Moonwalking with Einstein. Some people may have read it. It's about memory.
Yeah.
So this guy gets really interested in competitive memory challenges.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about these guys.
Which is kind of cool. It's like how many packs of cards can you memorize the order of in under 2 minutes, things like that.
Yeah.
And then he becomes the American national memory champion in under a year, just because he gets really obsessed with it. But he also just talks about like what is memory and how does it work. So one of the things he talks about is books used to be pretty scarce. You were lucky if you had 5 to 10 books available to you in your entire life.
Yeah.
And so what it meant to read something wasn't just that you've read it once, which is normally what I mean when I say I've read something. But you really mean like you've internalized it and you've struggled with it. And the process of memorizing it has kind of forced you to think about it a lot more deeply than you would have if you just read it through it once.
Yeah.
So like I've read The Count of Monte Cristo. Big, long book. He gets in trouble, goes to jail, breaks out, does a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
800 pages later, there's a showdown.
Yeah, yeah.
That's most of what I've gotten from it. But if you were to say when the book was written, you've read it, like you've thought about the concepts of religion, of mortality, of fate, of class struggle, what it means when they spell out how someone's dressed, how that relates to some of the other themes. Like you've really read the book. And I feel like we don't do a whole lot of that in our personal lives these days. It's really consumer based in the sense of read it once, then move on to the next thing. And what you want to talk about is how many books did you read this year?
Yeah,
I read 13 books. Have you read the new this yet? Have you read this yet? Have you read this yet? And not have you really, really gotten into any one thing?
I think we're...
Over time?
Well, I think I'm having a very good time, but this is the longest podcast by 10 minutes and we still haven't finished. So I think I might just move you swiftly along into the quickfire round. But look, I always enjoy having conversations with you because we get into these sort of philosophical debates and stuff, but I'm going to have to quickfire around you.
Cool, let's do it.
Where were you born?
Oakland, California.
Nice. Rough?
The birth?
No, rough.
Oh, Oakland.
I've heard some rough things about Oakland.
Yeah, Oakland is definitely and continues to be and has been for a long time pretty rough.
Yeah.
Not a very large city. There is some wealth there, but also just tremendous violence. So my mom worked at a construction shop in West Oakland. The corner where her shop was the murder capital of Oakland.
Yeah, nice.
So there would average about 7 to 12 murders on that particular intersection every year.
Why?
There's just a lot of murder going on. And,
just people just like, hey, I'm going to murder you at this spot.
It's just kind of, it's like an industrial park that's empty at night.
Oh, okay,
and it's a good place to...
It's not like, hey, meet me at this place for no particular reason.
You think you kind of figure that out. Like, really? He wants to meet me at 26th and MacArthur? Right?
Yeah. Something strange about
murdered
that.
those other 3 guys. But maybe he just wants to have a chat. Let's
maybe we'll just...
give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I assume clients you work on, you just work on all of them, don't you? Really?
I think so. Yeah, I think every client. Yeah.
2 things you like? Just anything you like? Just general likiness?
I love a new... Do you guys call them sweatshirts, jumpers?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? When they're new. So like when you first get it, before you put it through the dryer, they have that extra softness to them.
Yeah. And
the first time you wash them, you're still there, but it's not that just absolutely crisp, brand new thing. So I like that.
Yep.
And a cool drink of water. So not overly cold, not iced, but it's got a little perspiration on the glass when you've been out walking around, especially in a city.
Yeah.
So you've been in a hot city, you're trying to run some errands or whatever, and you get to sit down and have a cool glass of water somewhere. That's a great feeling that I like.
That is great. What do you think you would do if this role didn't exist? Let's say there was no internet, no technology kind of stuff.
Yeah. I've had a little side ambition to start like a novelty homewares business. I don't want to get into too much detail on it, but just sort of like silly versions of plates and spoons and pillows and pillowcases and stuff like that. I think so much of that stuff is so mundane that having a sort of like perverse or satirical bent on like something you just kind of use every day and don't really think about it would be fun. Both my parents were woodworkers, so I grew up in the wood shop a lot and making stuff. So I definitely have an ambition to get back to like something more handicraft oriented at some point. And maybe that's my retirement is to make physical things with my hands.
Yeah. And a lot of people have said that on the podcast. It's either that they wish that they could teach or give back or share their knowledge or physically make something. So there's like a desire, like inbuilt desire in all of us to...
Definitely don't want to teach. I used to say that when people ask me that question. Not for me.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the making stuff. I think part of it's, a lot of the work we do here is it's not done in a day. TA is a huge project, highly complex. The idea of doing something with your hands is you can see what you have done, and it's finished in a shorter time frame. I think that's a lot of what's appealing to about people.
Yeah, and again, it's sensory, which I think is what our business lacks. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, good plug.
And the eternal question, who would win in a fight? A chimpanzee with a knife or a shark that can breathe out of water?
Oh, chimpanzee. I mean, is this happening in water or out of water?
So I kind of imagine in kind of like an MMA style octagon. So the shark is there. It's not going to die from like the monkey just hiding in the corner and then eventually it'll die.
Yeah, so I mean, the shark, great, big gaping jaws. He can kind of flip and flap around a bit.
Yeah.
But basically the chimp just has to get behind him, get on its back away from the jaws, and just stab, stab, stab.
Yeah. I imagine that's okay. Because for me, it's like, it's probably 50-50. Like, he might get lucky, the shark might get lucky.
Well, have you ever seen the old TV show Street Sharks?
I know that one has, I've missed that viewing of Street Sharks.
Street Sharks is basically Ninja Turtles, but with sharks. So the sharks in this show they have legs and arms, and they're super jacked, but they can swim through concrete the way that a shark swims through water. So they live below the surface of the ground, much like a Ninja Turtle does. They can swim through the concrete, and then they bust out and shark attack whoever the villains are of the week. So when you first brought it up, I was like, oh, Street Shark would pretty much destroy anybody except maybe a Ninja Turtle. I don't know who would win that battle.
I don't think Street Sharks made it to Australia.
Yeah.
But I'm going to find this on YouTube and then share Street Sharks with everyone.
Street Sharks is fantastic.
It's kind of like the Transformers and the GoBots. Is that kind of the...
It's kind of like that. There was a series of things when Ninja Turtles got really successful. There was those, the Street Sharks, the Biker Mice from Mars.
Yeah, they didn't do very well, but I do remember that.
Same sort of idea. It's a mutant sort of thing.
Animal.
They have some sort of attitude a la Teenage Surfers.
Yeah.
And they kick a bunch of butt. There's probably more. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, I'm going with the chimp. Chimps are like I said about gorillas, their muscle density is so much greater than ours.
All right.
So once he gets a hold of that shark is toast.
Okay. Because Iris opened it up last week as well that if sharks are put onto their backs, something internally happens and they go unconscious. And that's how orca whales kill them, which I thought was amazing. And orca whales have learnt this behavior.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go with the classic internet question of 10 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck.
Yeah, I don't like that question. I don't know why. I think I've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
I'm trying to start my own, be amazing.
Okay. There's a good series of really good videos of like Terminator versus RoboCop. They do a whole skills breakdown. And they do animate a fight between these two that kind of breaks it all out. So they do that. They have Spider-Man versus Batman, Batman versus Captain America, Harry Potter versus Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, wow. This is amazing stuff.
Which are really great way to kill some time.
Yeah, cool. Is this all on YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Have you seen Epic Rap Battles of History? That's the same idea, but it's a rap battle instead of actual fight. So you might have Muhammad Ali versus Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Or Moses versus Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
All sorts of different Yoda versus, I don't know who, Dumbledore or something. Dumbledore versus Gandalf, definitely.
Yeah. So just their oratory ability, is that more like their speeches and how powerful they were?
Yeah, Al Capone versus Captain Hook.
Yeah.
So it's people who are kind of in the same area. Hitler versus Darth Vader was a very controversial one.
Yeah.
But
Darth didn't do a lot of talking. He just did a lot of choking.
Which Hitler brings up.
Yeah, he just let his choking do the talking for him.
Exactly. But it's epic rap battles are very good. But then this other one I can't remember the name. I'll look it up for you. They actually have a fight.
All right, awesome.
So who do you think would win, Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker?
I'm going to go with... Luke Skywalker. I don't think Harry Potter has the darkness in him to win it.
Even though he has he is one of the pieces of Voldemort's soul.
Yeah.
He's a Horcrux, so he is part of the Dark Lord in a sense, just like Luke Skywalker is the blood of the deadliest Sith of all time.
Yeah, but it's also that Harry. I don't know. Harry seems weaker than Luke Skywalker to me.
Is it the accent?
Might be the British accent. But then there's the whiny part of introducing Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. Like, but I wanted to go to get the power converters. Anyway, we are digressing again. Yeah, I apologize.
Way over time.
Way over time.
This will all be edited. This podcast will be 30 seconds of me saying,
Yeah. So, Saul, is there any last words you would have for our listeners?
No.